Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga sang in The Star is Born, we're far from the shallow now. Now we actually have to run governments. He's actually done that for quite a while in Dutchess County and successfully. I'm still a bit of a new kid on the block, 16 months into my tenure. But I'm joined by a lot of very talented people in Westchester government, many of whom served under my predecessors, and I'm very happy that they agreed to stay on to my administration, because we saw the administration of government not as fundamentally a political function between parties, but rather talented professionals who do their job every day and we work with. So two of our commissioners are with us today, both terrific people. Norma Drummond, who's our Commissioner of Planning, is with us. Norma, please stand. And everybody should know May Carpenter, who's our Commissioner of Senior Services and Programs. We're also joined by Blanca Lopez, who is Assistant to the County Executive on Housing Affairs. She's on our executive floor, the 9th floor, and is a point person for us. And I don't know if we've been joined yet by Emily Saltzman, who's our Deputy Director of Operations, but she as well is involved. You may notice that all four of them share something in common, besides being talented. It's the diversity that we bring to the table in this and in every other field, that we have people who are talented, who cut from all across the demographic slice, and we're very happy that these individuals are with us and have stayed with us and joined us. The challenges of housing in Westchester is something that's not new to me, even though being county executive is relatively new. I was 23 years old out of graduate school and was employed in my hometown of Mount Vernon as the housing coordinator for the city of Mount Vernon back in 1977. And with all of the arrogance of a newly minted master's degree public administration student who didn't really know how the real world worked, my job was to implement the new Section 8 housing program, existing certificates, and to convert Section 23 leased housing into Section 8 programs. I did that job for 2 years. I turned gray at that time. I dye it now. But what I learned was, and I think it's a very important thing, even as we talk about housing, is that as I went forward to qualify individuals for Section 8 benefit and to look at apartment units to determine if they were habitable, I was being involved with people who had a housing problem. And what I learned was those individuals had a housing problem. They also had a nutrition problem. They had a domestic violence problem. They had an education gap. There was a host of social ills that tied together. And we are not going to solve the problem in that particular situation over 40 years ago, or are we going to do it today, unless we understand both the interconnectedness of certain problems and issues, and also the need for us to partner beyond government to try to deal with these things. Yesterday I had the pleasure of being with a few people in this room in Peekskill, where there was a new project that was done on Main Street, very impressive lofts. And when you heard the announcement of all the different people that were involved in making this happen, from the financiers to the architects, right down the line, you realize how complicated it is to bring housing to marketplace. And we have in Westchester County, and it's true in other counties in the Hudson Valley, we have the realities of urban environment, we have the realities of classic suburban environment, and we have rural as well, rural on the wealthy side, so it doesn't really look like the Adirondacks rural, but the bottom line is open space land where acreage and parcels are deemed to be best used when they're multiple acres parcels. So in parts of North Salem, it looks nothing like the city of Mount Vernon. Yonkers, excuse me, Yonkers and Scarsdale are across a border from each other, and yet they're very different jurisdictions. And because we are in a home rule state, where local governments get to set the rules for planning and zoning and a host of other things, the role of the county government is that much less direct and has to be more indirect, where we partner through these things. The first thing for us that we understand in our Westchester County Government Administration is that we have to take an aggressive role in advancing affordable housing. If we do not take an aggressive role, a partnership role, but an aggressive role, then very little will get done. It's so hard to do on its own that the issues that the county can contribute to, the infrastructure issues, the incentivization, whether it's through the IDA or through other types of activities, will not in and of itself be enough to make these things happen. So we have to take an aggressive role, and we have to be a role of partnership with all of the other players in the game. And we are fortunate in this county, in our county, as I'm sure Mark will talk about in his, to have very many professional nonprofit organizations in the area of housing that we can partner with. And those organizations have had a track record of accomplishment And we learned from that, and instead of building a separate silo aside that, we work cooperatively with those organizations to try to advance what we have to do. I would make the point that I made a couple of times before. Many people understand what happens when you have a public-private partnership and a government partners with a corporate entity. And the presumption behind it is that corporate entity can do certain things that the government can't do as well, so that's why you contract out or you create some sort of a relationship. The same applies to not-for-profit organizations. When we work with not-for-profit organizations, it is not charity, it's not as we once talked about member items where we're giving out goodies to people. It's because there's a defined expertise in that not-for-profit organization that we can't replicate in government. And our partnership with them is not just a matter of ideology, but it's a matter of practicality. How do we deliver those things that we need? And in Westchester County, as we start to go through this tenure, we're looking very specifically to assess what our affordable housing needs are countywide in a county that has the diversity that I've just referenced, and of a county of almost 1 million people. Now, we're in the middle of an affordable housing study, which we've contracted. Patterns for Progress is the entity that is working with us on it. We hope to have it released sometime, I guess, 30, 60 days. We're going over some elements of it from the original draft. It will be shared with our Board of Legislators for their review, and then it will become the basis of how we move forward in grantsmanship and in trying to identify those areas in which we can work together. Obviously, a traditional role for the county government has been to find parcels of land that will reduce the cost of the overall construction, and there are some examples of that, particularly around the surplus land off of highways and roadways that have defaulted to the county. We've been able to use those in little spot places. But we have to do more than that, and the trend line that we're seeing now ties into the market housing trend line that we see. And certainly in our county, certainly from the middle of the county and south, is this explosion of transit-oriented development, where proximity to a Metro North train station has become a tremendously popular thing for market rate development. And we see it in downtown Yonkers, in the area where the train station is, initially between the train station and the river, which is a slight sliver of land, and a number of market rate projects came up. And now on the other side of the train station, as it moves up toward Getty Square. We've seen this in New Rochelle. They have a very innovative project with RXR, and the cranes, building cranes going up all over New Rochelle. And I know Luis Aragon is with us here today, Development Director of New Rochelle, and I'm sure he can speak to that if anybody has questions about how that innovation has evolved. And certainly here in White Plains, we have tremendous demand, and you see the excavation that precedes the development to follow. But it's been very important for us to try to incentivize a set aside of affordable units in those market rate projects. And that obviously is a function of the economics of the project and how we put it all together. And that's very important to us because the ability for us to find big pieces of open land to develop is much more limited in a county that's been developed for a lot longer time. We have places like Larchmont and Rye that have found places to put in affordable housing, senior housing, but it's been very difficult given the amount of land that's available. And then we also have each community, and we have 25 cities or towns that make up the bulk of our jurisdiction, but another 20 villages that intersperse within those towns. And each of them have their own vision about how they want to see their development evolve. And their zoning policies, their parking lot policies, amount of parking spaces per unit developed and so forth, different from place to place, making it very difficult for us to have a consistent countywide plan when we have to work through those localities in order to accomplish these things. In that, we're very fortunate to have the resources of New York State's HCR to work with us through some of those things, but every single project is tough sledding and hard to come by. We have something to the tune of about 1,000 affordable housing units in the pipeline, a certain number, about 450 of them that preceded my tenure, that's working its way through, and about another 500 or so that we've identified subsequently. But it is tough sledding. Every 30 units here and every 25 units there comes at a difficult, hard effort in order to put the math to come together. We have one example of something that we're proud of, and it's not yet under construction, but for many years we had a West Help project outside of the gates of Westchester Community College in Greenburgh, and it served a homeless housing purpose. It had a 20-year writ, and then it was to be changed after that, and those 20 years expired, that it did about 7, 8 years ago. That building is late fallow. And last year, we finally worked through Marathon Development, got a commitment for 74 units of affordable senior housing, which will go into that site. That's after 6-7 years of the house, of the building laying fallow, weeds growing high, and people driving by. They look at that and they view that as the failure of government. The failure of government to understand the need, the failure of government to understand how to put the resources together to get this done. Now, notwithstanding the experience I had 42 years ago in the city of Mount Vernon, the area, the environment in which we work in makes it difficult to do these things, but it is not impossible. And we see success stories when we look around us. And we do look to our friends in Dutchess County and other counties around us to see examples of how they have succeeded. And we may have a certain size and scope, but that doesn't mean we can't learn from every other jurisdiction and to try to figure out what are the best practices and how can we move forward. The single most important thing is that you have a commitment to be involved in affordable housing. There are philosophies that say in this society, government's role is to do the minimum amount of activities as is necessary, police the streets, pick up the garbage, treat sewerage, do certain basic functions, and that's it. And everything else is left to the invisible hand of the marketplace. And we see that in areas, whether it's mass transit, housing, and other areas, that the invisible hand of the marketplace on its own does not generate enough to be able to deal with these needs. But these are societal needs. And we have them ranging from people who are making 80% of the average median income to people who are homeless and sleeping on the streets if we don't find some means of being able to protect them from, in some cases, their own behavior and actions. So we are a long way from where we want to be in Westchester County. We will probably be a long way from where we want to be when my tenure is over. What I have learned, though, is that we have to make a step in the right direction, and we have to follow that with another step, and another step after that. That is our intent. That is why we have the talented people we have working with us, and hopefully we'll be able to take some encouragement from this session today. We'll go back more energized to figure out how to work around the barriers that we have, and we'll do that which we know we need to do, which is to remember that only those people that are properly housed will properly function in this society of ours and contribute to that society in every way. Thank you very much.